A luxury cruise ship disappears in the year 2000, never heard from again. Fast forward to today. Explorers find it entombed in Arctic ice, frozen solid between two monstrous icebergs. This video takes you inside the shocking discovery and connects it to history's most baffling maritime vanishings. Ghost ships, Bermuda Triangle horrors, and vessels that simply refuse to sink. Get ready for chills. Number 1. The Mary Celeste, one of the most infamous ghost ships in maritime history, has captivated imaginations for over 150 years with its eerie tale of sudden, inexplicable abandonment. Originally constructed in 1861 at Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, Canada, the vessel began life as the Amazon, a 282-ton brigantine launched under British registry. Her early years were plagued by misfortune. During her maiden voyage, the first captain fell ill with pneumonia and died. The ship suffered multiple collisions, including one in the English Channel, and ran aground in Cow Bay, Cape Breton Island, in October 1867, sold in 1868 to American owners. She was renamed Mary Celeste, underwent refits including a second deck for added capacity, and registered in New York. By 1872, the ship was under the command of Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, a respected, experienced mariner from Marion, Massachusetts, known for his sobriety and competence. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste departed New York Harbor bound for Genoa, Italy, carrying a cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial denatured alcohol, a volatile, non-potable ethanol used for fuel and solvents. Aboard were 10 souls: Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, who often sailed with him, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 crew members, mostly young, capable sailors from various nations. The voyage proceeded normally at first, battling typical Atlantic weather. The ship's log, meticulously kept by First Mate Albert Richardson, recorded positions daily. The final entry, made at 8 a.m. on November 25th, placed the vessel about 6 nautical miles northeast of Santa Maria Island in the Azores, with the ship making good progress under sail. 9 days later, on December 4th, or 5, depending on accounts, the British brig Dei Gratia, captained by John Morehouse, a friend and acquaintance of Briggs, spotted a vessel drifting erratically about 400 nautical miles east of the Azores, roughly at coordinates 3,820 and 1,715 W, flying no distress signals, but with sails partially set and flapping. She appeared abandoned. A boarding party from the Dei Gratia found the ship seaworthy, though with about 3 to 3.5 feet of water in the hold, not enough to sink her, and 1 pump disassembled. The cargo was largely intact, though 9 barrels were later found empty or leaking. Provisions for 6 months remained. Personal effects were undisturbed, including a sewing machine with unfinished work, the captain's sword in its place, and toys on deck. A half-eaten meal sat on the galley table, and the galley stove was still warm. Crucially, the single yawl, lifeboat, was missing, along with the chronometer, sextant, navigation book, and ship's register. No signs of violence, fire, or struggle existed. The Dei Gratia crew sailed the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, arriving December 13, 1872, where British authorities conducted a salvage inquiry. No evidence of foul play emerged, though suspicions of insurance fraud or conspiracy lingered briefly, ultimately dismissed. The mystery exploded in popularity after Arthur Conan Doyle's 1884 fictional story, J. Habakkuk. Jephson's statement, which popularized the misspelling Marie Celeste and added dramatic elements. Theories abound. The most plausible modern explanation involves alcohol fumes from leaking barrels creating a vapor buildup. Captain Briggs, fearing an imminent explosion, despite no actual blast, ordered a hasty evacuation into the lifeboat, perhaps after a waterspout or rough seas had caused minor flooding and panic. The small boat likely capsized in bad weather, dooming all aboard. Other ideas, mutiny, piracy, giant squid, or paranormal forces, lack supporting evidence. The crew's fate remains unknown. No bodies or wreckage from the lifeboat ever surfaced. After the incident, the Mary Celeste changed hands multiple times and met an ignominious end in 1885, when her last captain deliberately wrecked her off Haiti in an insurance scam. Yet her 1872 enigma endures as the quintessential maritime ghost story, a perfectly sound vessel sailing on. Crew vanished without trace, forever whispering of the sea's unforgiving mysteries. Number 2. The SS Bechimo, one of the most enduring legends in maritime history, began its life as a sturdy steel-hulled cargo steamer launched in 1914 at the Lindholmens Mekaniska Verkstad shipyard in Gothenburg, Sweden. Originally named Engermanelfen and built for a German company, the 1,322-ton vessel was acquired in 1921 by the Hudson's Bay Company for £15,000, renamed Bechimo and repurposed for the harsh Arctic trade routes. Operating out of Argos in Scotland, it carried essential provisions to remote Inuit settlements along the Victoria Island coast in Canada's Northwest Territories, returning with valuable pelts and furs in exchange. For nearly a decade, the Bechimo proved reliable, completing 9 successful voyages through treacherous waters, including passages via the Panama and Suez Canals when needed. Its crew navigated brutal Arctic conditions with skill. But disaster struck in the fall of 1931. On a routine trip from Vancouver bound with a lucrative cargo of furs valued at around $58,000, the ship became trapped in thick pack ice near Point Barrow, Alaska, in the Beaufort Sea during a ferocious October snowstorm. The crew, led by Captain E. Cornwell, initially abandoned ship and trekked over half a mile across the ice to shelter in Barrow for 2 days. When they returned, a blizzard had freed the vessel, but it soon vanished from sight. Miraculously, days later, an Inuk seal hunter spotted the Bechimo again, now lodged in ice about 45 miles, 72 kilometers away. The crew trekked back, boarded her once more, salvaged as many furs as possible, and set up a makeshift camp nearby. Another storm hit, and when it cleared, the ship had broken free and drifted off unmanned. Convinced it would soon succumb to the crushing ice and sink, the crew finally abandoned it for good, filing paperwork in Vancouver by March 1932 to declare it a total loss. Instead of sinking, the Bechimo defied expectations and became the legendary ghost ship of the Arctic. Over the next 38 years, it drifted aimlessly through the Beaufort Sea and along Alaska's northern coast, propelled by currents and winds, evading destruction. Sightings were frequent in the 1930s, boarded briefly by indigenous groups in 1933, who were trapped aboard for 10 days by ice, and by others in 1934, 1935, and 1939, including Captain Hugh Polson, who attempted salvage but failed due to weather. Explorers, hunters, and locals reported glimpses intermittently through the decades, often describing the rusting hulk locked in ice or listing heavily, its propeller long gone but hull remarkably intact. The final confirmed sighting came in 1969, when a group of Inuit spotted her frozen fast in pack ice between Icy Cape and Point Barrow, nearly 4 decades after abandonment. After that, she vanished from records. Despite searches, including an unsuccessful effort by Alaskan authorities in 2006, no wreckage has ever been found. Presumed sunk beneath the Arctic waves, perhaps crushed by ice or eroded by time, the Baichimo's ultimate fate remains one of the sea's great unsolved mysteries. Her story endures as a haunting testament to the Arctic's unforgiving power and the eerie resilience of a ship that refused to die when abandoned. Number 3. The MV Joyita became one of the most perplexing ghost ship mysteries of the modern era. A small wooden merchant vessel whose 25 passengers and crew vanished without explanation in the vast South Pacific. Built in 1931 in Los Angeles as a luxury yacht for Hollywood director Roland West, the 69-foot, 21-meter cedar and oak-hulled craft was originally named for his wife, Jewel Carmen Joyita, meaning Little Jewel in Spanish. Over the years, it served various roles: a pleasure boat, a patrol vessel, YP-108, for the U.S. Navy during World War II around Hawaii, and later a trading ship. In 1948, new engines were installed and the hull lined with 18 cubic meters of cork, making it extraordinarily buoyant, virtually unsinkable, as owners often boasted. By 1952, University of Hawaii professor Catherine Luamala purchased it and chartered it to British-born captain Thomas Henry Dusty Miller, a 41-year-old resident of Samoa who used the vessel for inter-island trade, fishing charters, and government contracts. On October 3, 1955, at around 5 a.m., the Joyita departed Apia Harbor on Upolu Island, Western Samoa, now Samoa, bound for the remote Tokelau Islands, a short 270 nautical mile, about 500 kilometers voyage, expected to take 41 to 48 hours. Aboard were 16 crew members and 9 passengers, totaling 25 people, including Captain Miller. His American mate Chuck Simpson, 28, a government official. World War II veteran surgeon Dr. Alfred Andy Dennis Parsons, en route to perform an urgent amputation. 2 pharmacists with medical supplies, a copra buyer. 2 children, the youngest just 3 years old, and various local workers. The cargo included medical supplies, food, empty oil drums, timber, and goods for the Tokelau White Sunday celebrations. Mechanical issues plagued the departure. 1 engine failed. The bilge pump was faulty, and the radio's wiring limited its range to roughly 2 miles. Despite these problems and advice against sailing, Miller, desperate to fulfill the charter and clear mounting debts, pressed on with only 1 engine running. The Joyita never arrived. By October 5th, concern grew in Tokelau, and a massive search by the New Zealand Air Force covered over 260,000 square kilometers but found nothing. 5 weeks later, on November 10, 1955, Captain Gerald Douglas of the merchant ship Tuvalu spotted the Joyita drifting near Vanuatu in Fiji, nearly 600 miles, 970 kilometers, off course and far from the intended route. The vessel listed heavily at a 45-degree angle, partially submerged, with about 3 to 4 feet of water in the hold, but thanks to the cork lining, it refused to sink. A boarding party found it eerily deserted. No one aboard, all 4 lifeboats, a dinghy and 3 Carly floats missing. Personal belongings untouched, including clothes, cigarettes, a doctor's bag with surgical tools and blood-stained bandages on deck, a half-eaten meal in the galley, and the radio tuned to the international distress frequency, though ineffective beyond close range. Cargo was mostly gone or scattered, and the second engine was oddly covered by a mattress. No signs of fire, explosion, or violent struggle appeared, yet the scene suggested urgency and possible injury. A formal inquiry in Apia in February 1956 deemed the passengers and crew's fate inexplicable based on evidence, blaming Miller for recklessness in departing with known defects. Theories proliferated. A sudden flooding from a collision with a submerged object or whale caused panic, leading to a hasty evacuation into overloaded boats that later capsized in rough weather. Miller's incapacitation or death, perhaps explaining the bloody bandages, left others in disarray, piracy or mutiny, even rogue waves or mechanical sabotage. The most accepted explanation centers on flooding and fear of sinking despite the ship's buoyancy. Passengers and crew abandoned ship prematurely, only to perish at sea while the Joyita drifted on. No bodies, wreckage from the lifeboats, or survivors ever surfaced. Decades later, only 6 of the 25 have been officially declared dead in some records, leaving the tragedy unsolved and cementing the Joyita's place as the Mary Celeste of the South Pacific, a sound vessel sailing ghost-like, its human cargo forever lost to the ocean's silence. Number 4. The Lady Lavabond stands as one of Britain's most enduring maritime legends, a haunting tale of love, jealousy, and supernatural retribution tied to the infamous Goodwin Sands off the Kent coast. According to folklore, the three-masted schooner set sail on February 13, 1748, coincidentally a Friday the 13th from London or nearby ports, bound for Porto in Portugal. Her captain, Simon Reed, or Simon Peel in some versions, a young and charismatic mariner, had recently married his beautiful bride, often named Annetta or Annette. Defying the ancient seafaring superstition that women aboard brought bad luck, he brought his new wife along for what was intended as a joyful honeymoon voyage, complete with wedding guests, a celebratory atmosphere, and a cargo reportedly including flour, meat, wine, and even gold. The first mate, John Rivers, harbored a deep, unrequited passion for the captain's wife and had once vied for her hand. Consumed by jealousy and rage as the ship approached the treacherous waters near Deal, Rivers paced the deck in torment. In a fit of madness, he struck the helmsman unconscious, seized the wheel, and deliberately steered the vessel straight into the shifting quicksands of the Goodwin Sands, a notorious graveyard where countless ships have met their end due to treacherous currents, fog, and shifting banks that can swallow vessels whole. The ship struck hard, breaking apart in the storm-lashed shallows. All aboard, including the captain, his bride, the crew and passengers, perished in the icy waves and sucking sands. No survivors emerged, and the wreck vanished beneath the tides. Yet the tragedy refused to fade. Legend claims the Lady Lavabond, cursed by the betrayal and bloodshed, reappears as a ghostly apparition every 50 years on the anniversary of her doom, replaying her final moments in spectral form. The first reported sighting came on February 13, 1798, when captains of at least 2 vessels, including the Edenbridge under James Westlake and the Fishing Smack, described seeing a phantom schooner gliding silently through the mists before disappearing. Similar eerie encounters were noted in 1848, convincing locals and prompting investigations. In 1898, more witnesses reported the glowing vessel, often enveloped in an unnatural green or white light. The most famous modern account occurred in 1948, when Captain Bull Prestwick allegedly observed her looking remarkably real yet emitting an otherworldly glow, sailing without sound before vanishing into the fog. Some tales mention lifeboats launched in vain to rescue the apparition, only to find empty seas. No contemporary historical records from 1748 confirm the existence of the Lady Lavabond, her captain, crew, or any such wreck on that date, suggesting the entire narrative emerged much later, possibly in the early 20th century, amplified by a 1924 newspaper article. Researchers have found no primary sources predating modern folklore, leading many to classify it as a romantic myth born from the Goodwin Sands' real dangers, where over 2,000 shipwrecks have claimed tens of thousands of lives. Atmospheric illusions like Fata Morgana may explain some sightings, yet the story persists as a cautionary fable of passion's destructive power, drawing watchers to the Kent coast every half-century in hopes of glimpsing the eternal phantom bride and her doomed vessel. Number 5. The SS Orang Medan, often cited in lists of maritime mysteries and ghost ships, appears to be a variant or misspelling of the far more widely known legend of the SS Orang Medana purported Dutch freighter whose chilling fate has become one of the most infamous, unsolved tales in seafaring lore. The name Orang Medan translates roughly from Malay Indonesian as man from Medan, referring to the Sumatran city, and the story is consistently tied to the busy, treacherous Strait of Malacca between Indonesia and Malaysia in the late 1940s. Most accounts pinpoint 1947 or 1948, though the exact year varies and remains unconfirmed. According to the enduring narrative, the Orang Medan was a cargo steamer navigating these pirate-prone waters when multiple vessels, including the American merchant ship Silver Star, intercepted a frantic Morse code distress signal. The message began with an SOS, followed by a horrifying transmission. All officers, including Captain, dead, lying in chart room and on bridge. Probably whole crew dead. A burst of incoherent dots and dashes ensued, ending with the radio operator's final desperate words, "I die." Silence followed, no further responses, no clarification. The Silver Star, closest to the reported position, altered course and soon sighted the drifting freighter engines stopped. No smoke from the funnel, decks eerily empty under the tropical sun. Boarding parties found a nightmarish scene. The entire crew lay dead across the ship, sprawled in unnatural positions with eyes wide open, mouths agape in frozen expressions of sheer terror, faces contorted as if witnessing unimaginable horror. Even the ship's dog was discovered mid-snarl, rigid in death. No wounds, no blood, no signs of struggle or violence marred the bodies. The vessel itself appeared undamaged, cargo intact, yet an oppressive silence hung over everything. As rescuers prepared to tow the Orang Medan to port for investigation, smoke suddenly billowed from the No-4 cargo hold. Flames erupted rapidly, forcing the boarding party to flee back to their ship. Moments later, a massive explosion rocked the freighter, lifting it briefly from the water before it plunged beneath the waves, taking all evidence and the bodies with it. The sea claimed the mystery forever. The tale has fueled endless speculation. Toxic gas leaks from hazardous cargo, perhaps chemical weapons or pesticides smuggled post-World War II, carbon monoxide poisoning, a burst of deadly fumes from illicit cargo, piracy gone wrong, or even supernatural forces. Skeptics note the absence of any official records, no Lloyd's Register entry for the ship, no logs from the Silver Star mentioning the incident, and the earliest printed accounts appearing years later. Some trace variants to 1940 newspaper reports, others to 1948 Dutch publications. Many researchers conclude it's an urban legend, possibly exaggerated from a real but mundane maritime accident or invented for sensationalism in the post-war era. Despite doubts, the Orang Medan endures as a cautionary ghost ship archetype, highlighting the dangers of remote shipping routes where help arrives too late or not at all, and secrets vanish into the deep. Whether fact or fiction, its spectral horror continues to haunt those who sail the Strait of Malacca. Number 6. The Carroll A. Deering, a majestic five-masted steel-hulled schooner built in 1919 by the G. Deering Company in Bath, Maine, was one of the last great commercial sailing ships of her era. Measuring 255 feet long and capable of carrying 3,500 tons of cargo, she represented the pinnacle of traditional sail design just as steam was overtaking the seas. Named after the son of her owner, the vessel began her final voyage in August 1920 under Captain William H. Merritt, a seasoned and well-respected mariner. Departing from Norfolk, Virginia, with a load of coal bound for Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the journey south proved uneventful. The return leg, however, would etch her name into maritime mystery forever. In Rio, Captain Merritt fell seriously ill and chose to remain ashore. His replacement was Willis B. Wormel, a 66-year-old veteran captain recently retired but persuaded back to sea for this single voyage. His first mate, Charles B. McClellan, was a capable but reportedly heavy-drinking officer. The crew of 10, mostly Danish and Swedish sailors, was described by observers in Brazil as restless and dissatisfied. On December 2, 1920, the Deering cleared Rio with a fresh cargo of coal destined for Hampton Roads, Virginia. The last known communication came on January 28, 1921. When the schooner passed Cape Henry and signaled the lightship, all was well. 3 days later, on January 31, 1921, the lookout at Cape Hatteras Life-Saving Station spotted a five-masted schooner hard aground on the infamous Diamond Shoals, the treacherous shifting sandbars known as the graveyard of the Atlantic off North Carolina. Heavy seas and gale-force winds prevented immediate rescue. When Coast Guards finally boarded on February 4th, they found an eerie, deserted vessel. The Deering sat upright and largely intact, yet completely abandoned. Meals were set on the galley table as if recently prepared pots still on the stove, food untouched. Personal belongings lay scattered, the captain's quarters appeared ransacked, and red lights for navigation were oddly placed on deck. Crucially, both lifeboats were missing, along with the ship's logbooks, chronometer, sextant, and all navigation equipment. The wheel was damaged, the nameplates removed, and the only living creature aboard was the ship's gray cat, calmly waiting to be fed. An extensive investigation by the U.S. Department of Commerce followed, interviewing witnesses and exploring every theory. Rumors swirled of mutiny, perhaps sparked by the elderly captain's strictness clashing with an unhappy crew, or piracy, as the early 1920s saw rampant rum running along the coast during Prohibition. Some speculated the crew had been lured away by bootleggers or taken by force. Communist agitators were even suspected, given the foreign crew and tense labor climate. The location within the Bermuda Triangle fueled supernatural explanations, though official reports dismissed them. Despite searches along the coast and inquiries in ports from Barbados to Boston, no trace of the 12 missing men, Captain Wormel, his mate, and the 10 crew ever surfaced. No bodies, no lifeboats, no confessions. The Carroll A. Deering was eventually stripped and dynamited as a hazard to navigation. Her mystery remains unsolved, one of the most compelling ghost ship cases of the 20th century. A proud vessel found silent and empty on a deadly shoal. Her crew vanished into the Atlantic's unforgiving embrace, leaving only questions and the mournful cry of gulls overhead. Number 7. The S.V. Zebrina, a sturdy three-masted schooner-rigged sailing barge of 189 tons gross, was launched in 1873 at Whitstable, Kent, England, initially designed for trade along the River Plate in South America. By World War I, she had become a reliable coastal trader under British registry, often carrying bulk cargoes like coal across the English Channel and beyond. In October 1917, amid the dangers of unrestricted submarine warfare, the Sabrina departed Falmouth, Cornwall, under the command of Captain Martin. She carried a small crew of 5 seasoned sailors and a hold full of coal from Swansea, destined for the French port of Saint-Brieuc in Brittany. The voyage began on or around October 15th, after a prior attempt days earlier had been aborted due to foul weather, forcing a return to port despite grim forecasts. Only 2 days later, on October 17, 1917, French Coast Guards discovered the vessel aground at Rossel Point, near Dieppe, south of Cherbourg on the Normandy coast. Remarkably, she sat upright in shallow water, about 6 feet deep, with no significant damage to the hull, despite drawing 9 to 10 feet when laden. The flat-bottom design likely spared her from breaking up on the rocks. Some rigging was disarranged, but otherwise the ship appeared seaworthy and intact. Boarding parties found an unsettling scene. The galley fire still smoldered. A meal was laid out on the table as if ready to be eaten. Personal effects and navigation instruments remained in place, yet not a single soul was aboard. No signs of violence, fire, flooding, or struggle marred the decks or cabins. The lifeboat was gone, but the logbook's final entries offered no clues to the abrupt abandonment. Initial suspicions pointed to a German U-boat attack common in those waters, where the crew might have been taken prisoner before the submarine intended to sink the vessel by gunfire or torpedo. Wartime records noted several similar incidents where merchantmen were boarded and scuttled. However, no U-boat logs or survivor accounts ever corroborated this for the Sabrina. A later investigation, detailed in David Masters' 1932 book When Ships Go Down, concluded the most likely explanation was a sudden squall or heavy sea that swept all 5 men overboard, allowing the unmanned ship to drift on autopilot until grounding softly on the French shore. The crew listed among Commonwealth War Graves Commission records as lost at sea were never found, their bodies claimed by the Channel's currents. The Sabrina was refloated, her coal offloaded, and towed to Cherbourg for assessment. Deemed a war risk, she was not immediately repaired but later returned to service. She survived into the post-war years, eventually ending her days as a houseboat before being destroyed by fire in 1953 at Velder Creek near Portsmouth. Though less sensational than the Mary Celeste, the Sabrina's brief, unexplained disappearance amid the horrors of the Great War underscores the perilous fragility of life at sea during conflict, where ordinary storms, unseen enemies, or sheer bad luck could erase an entire crew in moments, leaving only a silent, drifting shell behind. Number 8. The Wolfhound, a sleek 48-foot swan yacht, a high-end Swedish-built cruising sailboat from the renowned Nauters Swan Line, entered maritime lore not through centuries-old legend, but through a very modern, verifiable episode of abandonment in the North Atlantic. Registered to the Royal Irish Yacht Club in Dunlaughare, Ireland, the vessel was skippered by experienced sailor Alan McGettigan, who set out in early February 2013 from Connecticut, bound for Bermuda with a small crew including Declan Hayes, Morgan Crow, and Tom Mulligan, all seasoned members of Irish yachting circles. The plan was a straightforward offshore passage, but the Atlantic had other ideas. Just 70 miles north of Bermuda, ferocious weather struck. Towering 20-foot waves and sustained winds of 50 knots, about 57 miles per hour, hammered the yacht relentlessly. Wolfhound suffered 2 knockdowns, violent rolls that threw her on her side, dismasting potential or flooding risks looming. With the boat taking on damage and the safety of his crew paramount, McGettigan made the difficult call to abandon ship. He activated the EPIRB, Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon, At around 15:30 hours on February 9, 2013, a nearby Greek cargo ship, the Tetian Trader, responded to the distress signal, maneuvering through the storm to effect a rescue. All 4 men were safely taken aboard, leaving Wolfhound adrift and presumed doomed. Many assumed she would sink quickly in such appalling conditions. Against expectations, the yacht refused to go under. Roughly 9 weeks later, in April 2013, sailor and ocean researcher Matt Rutherford, aboard his vessel during the Ocean Research Project's work in the Atlantic, roughly 800 nautical miles southeast of Bermuda, edging into waters sometimes loosely associated with the Bermuda Triangle's outer fringes, spotted an eerily familiar sailboat drifting silently. Sails down, no engine running, no one visible on deck. The vessel behaved strangely, as if abandoned in haste. Boarding with a colleague, they found drawers flung open, personal belongings scattered across the cabin, yet the hull intact, mast standing, and no immediate signs of catastrophic failure beyond storm damage. Rutherford identified her as Wolfhound from markings and later confirmed her backstory. They attempted a salvage tow toward Bermuda, but engine troubles and fuel issues forced them to cut her loose once more. The yacht drifted on as a true ghost ship for years, her fate uncertain and fueling online speculation about Bermuda Triangle forces, magnetic anomalies, rogue waves, or unexplained phenomena, though the reality was far more prosaic. A storm forced abandonment in one of the ocean's busiest yet unpredictable regions. No supernatural reappearance occurred in the classic sense, but her survival far longer than anticipated added to the intrigue. Eventually, she faded from reports, likely succumbing to weather, currents, or gradual deterioration. The Wolfhound story serves as a stark reminder that even well-built modern yachts can become derelict in moments, when human safety trumps salvage, leaving silent, drifting relics to haunt the imagination in the vast Atlantic. Number 9. The Sam Rajalangi PB 1600, a large container ship built in 2001 and measuring over 177 meters, about 580 feet. In length, with a deadweight tonnage of around 26,510 tons, entered the realm of modern maritime mysteries in late August 2018 when local fishermen from Thamaseda village near Thongwa Township spotted the massive, rusty vessel grounded on a sandbar approximately 11 kilometers off the coast of Yangon, Myanmar, in the Gulf of Martaban, an arm of the Bay of Bengal. Flying an Indonesian flag, the ship appeared completely deserted, no crew, no cargo, no signs of recent human activity, prompting immediate reports to authorities and earning it the label of ghost ship in global headlines. Myanmar's Navy and police boarded the grounded freighter on August 30, 2018, to investigate. They found 2 thick towing cables still attached to the bow, clearly severed or snapped, along with evidence that the vessel had been under tow. Further inquiries quickly unraveled the mystery. The Sam Rajalangi PB 1600 had last been officially sighted near Taiwan in 2009, after which it seemingly vanished from maritime tracking records for nearly 9 years. In reality, it had been sold for scrap and was being towed from an unknown starting point, likely in Southeast Asia, toward a shipbreaking yard in Chittagong, Bangladesh, one of the world's largest centers for dismantling old vessels. During the tow, the ship and its tug encountered severe stormy weather in the region. The violent conditions caused the towing cables to break, separating the Sam Rajalangi from its escort. The tug's crew, facing immediate danger and unable to reattach or control the drifting hulk in the high seas, abandoned the tow and presumably sought safety, leaving the unmanned container ship to the mercy of currents and winds. It drifted aimlessly for an undetermined period, possibly weeks or longer, before running aground on the Myanmar sandbar, where fishermen discovered it intact but eerily empty. No illegal cargo, contraband, or foul play was found aboard, and the abandonment was deemed a straightforward consequence of the perils inherent in ship-breaking operations across South and Southeast Asia. These tows often involve aging, poorly maintained vessels moved long distances in unpredictable monsoon-influenced waters, where mechanical failures, storms, or cost-cutting on tugs can lead to sudden detachments. The incident highlighted environmental and navigational risks. Derelict ships can become hazards to navigation, leak pollutants, or wash ashore, burdening coastal communities. After the discovery, efforts were made to refloat or secure the vessel, but it proved difficult. By early October 2018, the Sam Ratchalangi PB 1600 reportedly sank in the Gulf of Martaban during further bad weather, disappearing beneath the waves and closing one chapter of its unexpected reappearance. The brief saga served as a reminder that in the busy shipping lanes of the Indian Ocean and Bay of Bengal, even massive modern ships can vanish and re-emerge as silent, abandoned relics when human decisions collide with nature's fury. Number 10. The MV Alta, a weathered 77-meter, 252-foot general cargo ship originally launched in 1976 as the Tananger in Norway, led a nomadic existence under multiple names and flags over 4 decades, including Pomar Merman, Polar Trader, Avantis II, Avantis I, Ilias, and finally Alta, before becoming one of the most notable modern ghost ships. Built for reliability in harsh conditions, the aging vessel had changed hands frequently by the 2010s, often flagged in obscure registries like Tanzania, reflecting the shadowy economics of budget shipping where maintenance sometimes lagged behind ambition. In September 2018, the Alta departed from Greece on what marine analysts described as an ambitious transatlantic voyage bound for Haiti in the Caribbean, carrying an unspecified cargo. Under a Panamanian or Tanzanian flag, accounts vary, she carried a crew of 10 men. Roughly 2,200 kilometers, 1,380 miles southeast of Bermuda, well into the open Atlantic and near the fringes of the infamous Bermuda Triangle, her main engine suffered catastrophic failure, rendering the ship powerless and adrift. With no immediate prospect of repair and deteriorating conditions, the crew issued a distress call. The United States Coast Guard responded swiftly, launching a relief operation that safely evacuated all 10 mariners by helicopter or lifeboat transfer to a nearby vessel in October 2018. Once the crew was secure, the disabled Alta was left unmanned. Her owners, never publicly identified, apparently unwilling or unable to fund a tow or salvage. Abandoned at sea, she became a derelict hulk, her automatic identification system, EYES, transmissions ceasing likely switched off or disabled, making her far harder to track amid vast ocean currents. For nearly 18 months, the Alta drifted silently across the Atlantic, propelled by prevailing winds, the North Atlantic Current, and the whims of weather systems. She weathered massive storms, rusted further under relentless salt spray, yet stubbornly remained afloat thanks to her watertight integrity and buoyant design. The only confirmed sighting during this phantom voyage came in late August or early September 2019. When the Royal Navy icebreaker, HMS Protector, en route to the Bahamas, encountered the empty vessel adrift in the mid-Atlantic. Photos and reports from the crew documented her eerie condition. Decks deserted, superstructure intact but neglected, no signs of recent human presence. Her lonely odyssey ended abruptly on February 16, 2020, when Storm Dennis, a ferocious extratropical cyclone battering Western Europe with hurricane-force winds and massive swells, drove the derelict ship onto the rocky shoreline near Ballycotton, a small fishing village in County Cork, Ireland. She wedged hard aground, bow first on the jagged coast, her hull battered but largely unbroken. A local jogger first spotted the unexpected arrival, alerting authorities. Irish Coast Guard helicopters and teams confirmed she was empty, with no crew or valuables aboard beyond residual fuel and debris. The grounding sparked immediate environmental concerns, potential oil leaks, asbestos in her aging structure, and hazards from unsecured cargo prompting exclusion zones and warnings to the public. Salvage efforts proved complex and costly. The owners remained absent, leaving Irish authorities responsible. Partial dismantling occurred over subsequent years, but significant wreckage lingered on the rocks as of later reports. A rusting monument to modern maritime abandonment driven by mechanical failure, economic indifference, and the Atlantic's unforgiving power. The Alta story illustrates how even in the age of GPS and satellite tracking, derelict vessels can vanish into obscurity, only to re-emerge dramatically, posing real threats to coastlines and ecosystems long after their human element has fled. Number 11. The MV Hoya, a modest mid-20th century merchant vessel operating in the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean, joined the ranks of enigmatic ghost ships when it vanished during a routine voyage in 1959, only to reappear weeks later as an abandoned derelict. Details surrounding the Hoya remain frustratingly sparse and largely unverified in major maritime archives, suggesting it may stem from anecdotal reports, regional shipping logs, or compilations of lesser-known disappearances rather than well-documented incidents like the Mary Celeste or Joita. What is known paints a picture typical of the era's isolated Pacific trade routes, where small freighters carried essential goods between remote islands, often with minimal crew and limited communication technology. In 1959, the Hoya set out from an unspecified port, likely in the western or central Pacific, on a standard inter-island or coastal run, laden with general cargo such as supplies, timber, or perishables. The exact route, departure date, and crew complement are not precisely recorded in public sources, but the ship carried a small number of mariners, perhaps 8 to 12, typical for vessels of its class. The voyage proceeded normally at first, but the Hoya failed to arrive at its destination, prompting concern among owners, families, and port authorities. A search was initiated, but the immense scale of the Pacific, millions of square miles of open water made comprehensive coverage impossible with the era's limited aircraft and vessel resources. Weeks passed with no sightings, no distress signals intercepted, and growing fears that the ship had succumbed to a storm, collision, or other calamity. Approximately 1 month later, another vessel, possibly a passing freighter or fishing boat, stumbled upon the Hoya drifting aimlessly in remote Pacific waters. She was found partially listing or low in the water but still afloat, her engines silent, decks empty, and no trace of human life aboard. The lifeboats were conspicuously missing, indicating the crew had evacuated in haste, perhaps into rough seas where survival was unlikely. Personal effects, cargo, or what remained, and the galley showed signs of recent use, meals half prepared or belongings left behind, but no evidence of fire, explosion, violence, or struggle. The ship's condition suggested an onboard emergency, heavy weather overwhelming her, a structural failure like a breached hull, or sudden flooding that forced abandonment. despite the vessel's ability to stay afloat afterward. Theories for the disappearance mirror those of similar Pacific cases: a rogue wave or typhoon forcing the crew to abandon ship prematurely, mechanical breakdown leading to panic, or an unseen collision with debris, a reef, or even a whale causing rapid ingress of water. No bodies, wreckage from the lifeboats, or survivor accounts ever emerged, leaving the fate of the mariners sealed in mystery. Vast distances and sparse traffic in the region complicated any recovery efforts, and the Hoya was likely left adrift or eventually scuttled as a hazard. This obscure incident underscores the perils of mid-20th century Pacific navigation before widespread radar, reliable radios, and satellite tracking, where a ship could vanish into the blue expanse, re-emerge as a silent ghost, and leave only questions in its wake. Like many forgotten tales from that era, the MV Hoya's story fades into the broader tapestry of maritime enigmas, a quiet reminder of the ocean's capacity to swallow lives without explanation. Number 12. The MV Hoya, a modest mid-20th century merchant vessel operating in the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean, joined the ranks of enigmatic ghost ships when it vanished during a routine voyage in 1959, only to reappear weeks later as an abandoned derelict. Details surrounding the Hoya remain frustratingly sparse and largely unverified in major maritime archives, suggesting it may stem from anecdotal reports, regional shipping logs, or compilations of lesser-known disappearances rather than well-documented incidents like the Mary Celeste or Joyita. What is known paints a picture typical of the era's isolated Pacific trade routes, where small freighters carried essential goods between remote islands, often with minimal crew and limited communication technology. In 1959, the Hoya set out from an unspecified port, likely in the western or central Pacific, on a standard inter-island or coastal run, laden with general cargo such as supplies, timber, or perishables. The exact route, departure date, and crew complement are not precisely recorded in public sources, but the ship carried a small number of mariners, perhaps 8 to 12, typical for vessels of its class. The voyage proceeded normally at first, but the Hoya failed to arrive at its destination, prompting concern among owners, families, and port authorities. A search was initiated, but the immense scale of the Pacific, millions of square miles of open water, made comprehensive coverage impossible, with the era's limited aircraft and vessel resources. Weeks passed with no sightings, no distress signals intercepted, and growing fears that the ship had succumbed to a storm, collision, or other calamity. Approximately 1 month later, another vessel, possibly a passing freighter or fishing boat, stumbled upon the Hoya, drifting aimlessly in remote Pacific waters. She was found partially listing or low in the water but still afloat, her engines silent, decks empty, and no trace of human life aboard. The lifeboats were conspicuously missing, indicating the crew had evacuated in haste, perhaps into rough seas where survival was unlikely. Personal effects, cargo, or what remained, and the galley showed signs of recent used meals half prepared or belongings left behind, but no evidence of fire, explosion, violence, or struggle. The ship's condition suggested an onboard emergency, heavy weather overwhelming her, a structural failure like a breached hull, or sudden flooding that forced abandonment despite the vessel's ability to stay afloat afterward. Theories for the disappearance mirror those of similar Pacific cases: a rogue wave or typhoon forcing the crew to abandon ship prematurely, mechanical breakdown leading to panic, or an unseen collision with debris, a reef, or even a whale causing rapid ingress of water. No bodies, wreckage from the lifeboats, or survivor accounts ever emerged, leaving the fate of the mariners sealed in mystery. Vast distances and sparse traffic in the region complicated any recovery efforts, and the Hoya was likely left to drift or eventually scuttled as a hazard. This obscure incident underscores the perils of mid-20th century Pacific navigation before widespread radar, reliable radios, and satellite tracking, where a ship could vanish into the blue expanse, re-emerge as a silent ghost, and leave only questions in its wake. Like many forgotten tales from that era, the MV Hoya's story fades into the broader tapestry of maritime enigmas, a quiet reminder of the ocean's capacity to swallow lives without explanation. Number 13. The USS Pickering, a 187-ton topsail schooner of the United States Revenue Cutter Service, later transferred to the Navy, was one of the earliest American naval vessels to vanish without trace in the western Atlantic, contributing to what would centuries later be dubbed the Bermuda Triangle's legacy of mysteries. Launched in 1798 at Newburyport, Massachusetts, by master shipbuilder William Hackett, the Pickering was a sleek, fast two-masted vessel armed with 14 4-pounder guns and a crew complement of around 90 officers and men. Named after Timothy Pickering, Secretary of State under President John Adams, she embodied the young republic's efforts to protect its commerce during the quasi-war with France. 1798 to 1800, an undeclared naval conflict sparked by French seizures of American merchant ships. In the summer of 1800, under the command of Master Commandant Benjamin H. Caldwell, sometimes recorded as Benjamin Caldwell, the Pickering received orders to proceed from Newcastle, Delaware, near the Delaware River, to the West Indies. Her mission was to convoy merchant vessels, patrol against French privateers, and generally safeguard American trade in the Caribbean. She departed in late July or early August 1800 with a full crew of approximately 90 souls experienced sailors, officers, and possibly a few Marines or supernumeraries. The voyage took her southeast through the Atlantic, past the Carolinas and into the treacherous waters between the American mainland and the Bahamas, an area notorious even then for sudden, violent weather. Sometime in August 1800, likely between the 20th and 28th, the Pickering disappeared. No distress signals were reported, no wreckage ever sighted, and no survivors or debris washed ashore despite diligent searches by other U.S. Navy vessels and merchant ships in the region. Contemporary accounts noted that a severe hurricane swept through the same stretch of ocean during late August, claiming several other ships and causing widespread damage to convoys and islands in the West Indies. One report from a surviving vessel mentioned seeing a schooner believed to be the Pickering struggling in mountainous seas before losing sight of her amid blinding rain and towering waves. The storm's ferocity, combined with the Pickering's relatively light construction, designed more for speed than heavy weather endurance, likely overwhelmed the ship. She may have broached, dismasted, or foundered rapidly, with all hands lost to the churning Atlantic. The U.S. Navy declared the Pickering and her entire crew lost at sea by late 1800, with no further trace ever found. In an era before wireless communication, radar, or reliable weather forecasting, such vanishings were tragically common. Yet the Pickering's complete disappearance, without so much as a floating spar or body, stood out. The incident became an early, often cited example in later Bermuda Triangle compilations, illustrating the region's unpredictable gales, shifting currents, and navigational hazards long before the term Bermuda Triangle existed. Though the cause was almost certainly a natural hurricane rather than anything supernatural, the loss of 90 lives underscored the perilous nature of early American naval operations in the open Atlantic, where a single storm could erase a ship and her company forever, leaving only silence and unanswered questions in their wake. Number 14. The USS Cyclops, one of the largest and most tragic non-combat losses in United States Navy history, was a Proteus-class collier launched in 1910 at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, measuring 542 feet long with a beam of 65 feet and a displacement of 19,360 tons when fully loaded. She was designed to carry vast quantities of coal to fuel the fleet during the era of coal-powered warships. By 1918, amid World War I, the Cyclops had been repurposed to transport strategic manganese ore, a critical alloying metal for steel production, from Brazil to the United States to support the war effort. Under the command of experienced Lieutenant Commander George W. Worley, the ship departed Rio de Janeiro on February 16, 1918, loaded with 10,800 long tons of manganese ore destined for Baltimore. After a brief stop in Barbados on March 3rd to 4th to take on additional coal and provisions, she cleared port on March 4th with 306 souls aboard, 236 officers and enlisted men, including a detachment of Marines, plus 70 civilian passengers and a small number of prisoners under guard. The Cyclops was already known to have structural concerns. Her aging hull showed signs of stress, and she had been reported as having engine troubles and a pronounced list to starboard even before leaving Brazil. Overloading was suspected. The manganese ore, denser than coal, pushed her well beyond normal design limits, potentially weakening bulkheads in the keel. After departing Barbados, the Cyclops was expected to reach Baltimore around March 13th. She never arrived. No distress signal was ever sent, no wreckage, lifeboats, oil slicks, or bodies were ever found despite extensive searches by Navy vessels and aircraft covering thousands of square miles along her projected route through the western Atlantic waters, later popularized as part of the Bermuda Triangle. The last known communication was a routine report from Barbados confirming her departure and good condition. The Navy's official inquiry, concluded in 1919, could reach no definitive cause. Theories included catastrophic structural failure from overloading, causing the ship to break in two and sink rapidly in heavy seas. A sudden squall or rogue wave overwhelming her, boiler explosion, or even mutiny given Worley's controversial reputation. He was German. Born, had changed his name from Johann Friedrich Wichmann, and faced rumors of pro-German sympathies during wartime. More sensational explanations, giant squids, magnetic anomalies, or extraterrestrial abduction emerged later in Bermuda Triangle literature. Decades of investigations, including sonar sweeps and deep-sea searches, have yielded nothing. No confirmed debris field or wreck site has ever been located. The disappearance of the USS Cyclops, with all 306 lives lost, remains the single greatest non-combat loss of life in U.S. naval history and the cornerstone of Atlantic maritime mystery, a silent testament to the sea's power to erase even the mightiest vessels without a whisper of evidence. Whether trapped between icebergs or lost forever in the Bermuda Triangle, these silent ships carry stories we'll never fully hear. Thanks for sailing through the shadows with us. Stay curious, stay safe, and never underestimate the power of the deep. Like, subscribe, and share your own eerie ocean tale below. We read everyone. Thanks for watching.